Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about hiring people. This has come up a lot. I've had a video half prepared for this for a long time. I've noticed people here and then when I talk about staffing up a project or interview questions, they would ask me, well, how did you hire people? How did you go about hiring people? So I want to talk about how and when I did that because it's a little surprising how long it was before I ever had to do that. For all my beginning games, I was simply placed in them. I was assigned to it. So, Grand Slam Bridge, Bard's Tale construction set, Rags to Riches, I was just assigned. This is what you're doing next, and here are the people you're doing it with. So, Fallout was the very first game where I was in charge, where I was going to be responsible for putting together the entire game, or at least being the project leader. I was called the producer, but these days I would probably have been called the project leader and the producer. But whatever. My point is, even on that game, all of the people who were on it were assigned to me. As they came off other projects, Interplay administration would look at what was out there and they would assign me people. So even for Fallout, I really didn't get to pick the people who were on it, with one exception. Fred Hatch, my assistant producer, I did ask for him, sort of. I was starting to get a little overwhelmed with all the different duties I had to do on Fallout. I was the producer, the lead programmer, and I also did design. It was a lot of work. And production ended up having a lot of busy work that I didn't know about, like project reports, like doing Gantt charts on Microsoft Project, which I don't even want to get into. So I remember going to the executive producer and I said, could I please have an assistant producer? And he said, you don't need one. You only have one project. I then pointed out to him two different producers who had one project and they had an assistant producer, and those producers didn't do anything else. They weren't being a lead programmer. They weren't doing design on their games. They certainly weren't maintaining an OS abstraction library that was being used in 4 or 5 other games. So he relented and went, okay, I think you do need an assistant producer. And I said, great. Can I have Fred Hatch? Fred Hatch was his assistant producer. It worked out. I ended up getting Fred. And Fred did a lot of great stuff on Fallout. He handled some of the production reports. I think I wrote most of them, but he handled like the Gantt charts and some organizational stuff. And he handled the organizing of all the voiceover. He would drive up to Hollywood. He would sit through the sessions. He would bring back the tapes for our audio people to divide up. He would get those new files to people who then had to animate the heads. I mean, basically, assistant producers do a lot of stuff. Anyway, because of this, it wasn't until Arcanum that I actually had to hire people. Like literally, get resumes and hire people to work for me. Since Arcanum started in 1998, and I didn't have to do that till late 1998, since I started in 1981, I was in the industry for 17 years before I had to hire a single person. Now, that's not to say I wasn't involved in interviews, but I'm talking about when I had to hire people, it was 17 years. By then, I knew a lot of people in the industry. So I want to kind of break down like the hiring of people into the sources of where they came from. The first source was previous coworkers. Now, I didn't go to any of them and go, come work for me. A lot of people, when I left Interplay, a lot of people I'd worked with contacted me, especially after the news hit that we had been funded, and said I would love to come work on a project. There was also a really good source of people was school, both fellow students, especially grad students, because I was located. Troika's first office was just a mile away from UCI's campus, maybe 2. So a lot of the people I had been in grad school with from 87 to 91 were still around 7 years later, and some of them were looking for work. So that was a great way of finding really good programmers. Also, I taught a class in game development in 99. And at least one person on Arcanum was hired because I'd seen their work, their code in that class. And a few more were hired on Temple. So school, both being in school and teaching, was a great way of meeting and sort of casually vetting people who wanted to come into the game industry. There were also industry folks, not people I'd worked with, but from other companies. LA is a very dense game development area. And while I'm not a big networker, it's always been a fault of mine, I did meet people from other companies. Now, it was interesting because Interplay had a policy of no do not fraternize, I can't say that word, with other companies. They told us they would fire us if they found us hanging out with people from different companies, which is a little ironic because there was a weekly evening poker night with higher ups from other companies. But I basically said, F that. I did it anyway. I figured if I got fired over something like that, I'm not going to be embarrassed by it. I'm going to wear it as a badge. And if someone, a new company asked me why I got fired, I'd be like, because I played D&D with people at other game companies. In fact, I ended up playing D&D with people up at DreamWorks. So that was fun. And it let me meet people at lots of different game companies and of different sizes and in different departments. So another thing that helped hire people was press. Now, this is something that may not help you on your first game, but we not only received, Leonard and Jason and I, a lot of press when we left Interplay and started Troika, so people out there knew a game company was being created. But we were also known for our games. Fallout got people applying to work at Troika on Arcanum because they're like, hey, I really love Fallout. Are you doing anything like it? And then Arcanum got us a lot of people who worked on Temple and Vampire Bloodlines. So, and that was all through press. When things would come out in game magazines about Troika making these games or just spun up a new game, we would get resumes. And then that was, that would go into our pile of circular file, which we even told people, we got your resume and we're going to keep it on file. We may not need somebody now, but we hired several people by contacting them 6 months later and saying, are you still interested? Now, some people just sent resumes. I would like to point out that's how I got my job at Interplay. I just cold sent my resumes out to several companies, including Interplay. And that's where I got hired as a contractor to do Bard's Tale and then full-time work for Rags to Riches and then Fallout. So just sending your resume to game companies can work. We ended up hiring people in the 7-year lifespan of Arcanum from all those sources. Probably some videos of mine you should watch if you're interested is I have videos on questions I like to ask in interviews. That helped, weed through the different candidates. Remember that I said there was a video about you should make a demo and include it with your resume, either on a floppy or a CD or have a link somewhere where people can play it. And I talk about how it moved your resume to the top of a pile. I'm saying that from experience. Resumes I got that included some kind of working demo got moved right to the top of a pile. And I can tell you, especially in the 90s, that meant that person had worked. There was no game engine for them to download for free and put something out. These people had to put something together. And it was impressive. I mean, I'm not saying I saw complete, finished, polished games, but I saw people who had put in the work. And I thought, this person, I'm going to move this resume to the top of the pile. And when they come in for the interview, I've got questions for them. So I also have a video, just a generic how to get a job in the industry video. And you may want to watch that. But specifically, what I wanted to talk about here then was I didn't do a lot of hiring for a long time. Those were the sources of where I found people to hire. And you can watch those other videos on what I looked for, what I did in interviews, and what questions I asked and what I looked for in candidates. So I hope if you had any questions about how to hire people, if you're trying to put together a team, I hope this video helped.